Hello and welcome to another episode of the LCI Roundtable. I am Carrie Baldwin, and Doug has me guest hosting tonight because he decided that it was about time for a woman to be in charge of our resident patriarch, Matthew Bellis.
We are under judgment.
Who also happens to be our birthday boy today.
Oh, how cute.
And
thank you, Carrie, for that wonderful birthday wish. I just do wish that God wasn't judging us now by having a woman in charge.
We are also joined by LCI founder Norman Horn and our resident expert on everything Latin America, Aaron Cuevas.
Natural born bilinguist.
Yes, welcome, guys. So we are going to Jezebel it up tonight because that's how we heathens roll.
Excellent.
Today, let's see, we're going to get started actually with Aaron. Aaron's got some news about what is this gold going on in southern Venezuela. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so the story goes like this. Someone posted a video that it seemed like very trivial, but for the people that were engaged in it, because for them it's so normal, but everyone in the libertarian monetary community is going insane for it. We discovered that for a couple of years in southern Venezuela, they've been using gold for daily purchases like nothing. And then someone was just trying to explain how easy it is to just literally go pick up gold nuggets, weight them, and then whomever's in charge of the grocery store actually tells you what do you want to pay on dollars. I think they still accept bolivares, but almost nothing. Or gold nuggets, and that's it. I mean, it was the simplest thing in the world, and everybody was going like, oh yeah. Everyone that was answering was like, how can this be? How do you guys even figure it out? How can you know this? How can you know? And the people trying to explain were like, well, that's the way it is. I mean, just for them, it's super, super, super normal. On top of that, it has strong libertarian aspects to the situation. The name of the town is Tumeremo, Venezuela. So you can say southern Venezuela and you'll be okay.
Scroll down in the show notes or whatever, and we'll show you what that actually looks like.
We're going to show you.
Hold on. You're telling me these provincial rubes down in southern Venezuela, outside of the beautiful city of Caracas, has been able to figure out a monetary system that is backed up by something that people value? How could they do this without the centralized government and the central bank forcing them to do all these things? Explain yourself, sir.
Okay, on top of that, they don't have an official police. It's just locals take care of anything that goes wrong. Anyone that misbehaves, they just kick them out of town and they don't let them back in.
How is it possible?
No jail.
Impossible.
No,
Wow.
No jail?
Impossible.
No, for them it's like, well, if you don't behave, we don't want you here. So,
Oh my gosh.
And they openly say, if you guys want to come and open a business, that's fine. You guys want to come and work as long as you're entrepreneurs, that's fine.
Wait, so these guys use hard money. They're restitution based, and they support free trade and open immigration?
Yeah. And mistreating women is one of the most shunned and punished.
And they respect you, right? What?
Dude, I'm there.
Wow.
I'm there. Bye, Matthew.
Wow. And see where I'm not wanted.
And what I love and what I love is that literally they were just telling you like it's just, you know, it's so normal, so common that they just tell you, well, that's the way it is. And when people would wonder, they were like, why not? Like literally they didn't know what was the big deal about it. Exactly.
But honestly, you've got, you know, the socialist government in Venezuela. Did they just kind of forget about this town, or are they just kind of passing by, or were they just so adamant about their freedoms that they decided, man, let's not oppress them?
Our guess is that there were a lot of troubles in 2016. We still don't know all the details because it's a very small town.
Sure.
But the government of Venezuela by now, or at least from a year ago, they don't have the capacity. They don't have the capacity to produce oil. A lot of people don't understand this. Venezuela, who has a bunch of oil literally just laying around, produces a lot less oil than ever. The production of oil has collapsed. Now, which means everything else has collapsed. So the government has no control over anything at all. Even the simplest thing is pulling out oil out of the ground. So the government in Caracas might have some kind of influence, but outside of it, it's all that area in southern Venezuela seems to have almost no influence, and they're completely ruled by local customs. Just think about it. If some of you guys are familiar, southern Mexico, there's a lot of communities in Chiapas, Oaxaca that are completely ruled by local customs. That's pretty much how it's developing. The central government can't do anything, so they worry about finding food up north and worrying even about gold, because they don't have the logistical capacity to go bother people over there. So
that's fantastic.
It is.
It's absolutely wonderful to see the fact that people can live their own lives and they can live in a community and work together with one another and come up with their own system of currency and their own system of just laws, and do that outside of a government that is tyrannical and oppressive. And I think we should all give them a big round of libertarian Christian applause. Yay. To the unnamed town in Venezuela. Way to go.
Southern Venezuela.
Venezuela. You have to be specific.
Southern Venezuela. Thank you.
Well,
so there you go. That's
so definitely look down below. We'll have some links that you can follow up on some of this information and enjoy learning even more.
Yes.
Beautiful.
In the meantime, there's not so good news here in the United States, as there are rumors of going back on COVID lockdowns, and Matthew's going to explain that one for us. Matthew.
I mean, come on, man. I mean, things are going bad, right? Everything is being terrible, and it's pretty much in all probability that we'll see more guidelines and restrictions amid rising COVID cases. So, whatever, man.
It's rich already for Biden to be able to talk in any terms of probability, just because I don't think he has the capacity to understand it. But that's
the concept of time has lost Biden altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. And coherent sentences.
Yeah. Humans are characteristically bad at understanding risk, but presidents are even worse.
I do love, though, that the reporters are trying to get any kind of coherency out of Biden, and they will take the most mundane sentence and trumpet it and make it sound actually good, because he said, and by the way, we had a good day yesterday. And that's the quote from Biden. So yes, but hey, we did see a small, insignificant rise in COVID cases. I actually have friends who currently have it and are personally quarantined in Las Vegas, even though they don't live in Las Vegas. But they are sick, so people are getting sick. But I think it is so statistically minimal, and from what I have seen by the data, so statistically small as to be a blip on the radar. And as soon as any amount of risk seems to get into the larger culture these days, we panic, forget about science, forget about immunity, and think that lockdowns are the only way to take care of diseases anymore. So these are rumors that we're going to go on full lockdowns again. There's not anything set in stone. We don't know that this is going to happen. I know that we in Pennsylvania have really fought back on this. So who knows, whatever clashes may come in the future, but it just kind of goes to show that the prevailing wisdom in DC is that whenever anything bad that may be outside of their control, the answer to them is just to lock it down, which I think is pretty terrible. And I think people will see the bad outcomes of this type of decision making in the near future. I'm not threatening anything. I just want to let my FBI agent know that I'm not threatening anything. But I think that there will be blowback, because I have seen statistics and polls that actually are blaming Biden for rapid inflation and price increases, for decrease in wages, and for job stagnation because of people not going back to work. So the blame is being put solely on the White House at this moment. And I think any kind of further lockdowns from the Biden administration will just be seen as further bad governance, and the blowback could be even worse.
It's crazy to also consider that of all the policies that one could put in place in order to try and mitigate effects of a pandemic, lockdowns are obviously the worst, both from just like a purely principled perspective and also from a statistical point of view. It's baffling to me that this is even on the table, considering that the best data that we have out there routinely and repeatedly shows that lockdowns do not help with your economy. They don't realistically even help to prevent pandemics. And it's like, there's really no good reason to do them. And it's baffling to me that this is still like even considered to be an option anymore.
Right. But, well, lockdowns have kind of been seen to be a little bit like money printing. You're not really staving off any kind of economic calamity. You're just kicking the can down the road. And lockdowns do the same type of thing. You may buy yourself some time, but the pandemic or the disease is going to run through the course of the population anyway. So it's kind of like, Tom Woods's old contractor scenario, where if you're going to reach hardships, you want to know about the hardship as quick and as soon as possible so you can properly plan for them, rather than keep staving it off, pushing it off, and pretending like it's not going to happen, because it's going to.
Yeah. Yep. It makes sense.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, how people will react to that, because I remember when the CDC came out saying, hey, we don't have to wear masks anymore. Everybody was like, it was like, finally, everybody was tired of it. And so it'll be interesting to see, although I did notice in Australia, they are using the military to enforce their re-lockdown. So they're going full on militarized tyranny over there.
The military's brought out because the citizenry has really shown up in force themselves to kind of protest these lockdowns. We've seen protests in France. We've seen protests in Greece. So in quite a few places, we're seeing the citizenry realize that the government's not going to just willingly give you back your freedom and say, oh, oopsie, we made a boo-boo. We're not going to do those lockdowns anymore. People are going to start pushing back in a big way, and we just pray that it doesn't turn violent. So,
right.
Well, and just top-down management of everything like this just doesn't work, guys. I mean, we know that the government has a very bad ability of managing an economy. They can't seem to get that right, and they can't manage almost any reasonable organization of any reasonable size in any particularly good way. Why would we expect them to manage a lockdown well, of all things? So it's just like, why would you give the government a sledgehammer to deal with something that really needs it's like a little bitty nail that you only you need to use very precisely. This is it's madness.
Guys, help me out with this. Lockdowns are very state or county wise decision, isn't it? So why is Biden even?
Well, it ends up being like really state driven more than anything else. But then Biden knows. I mean, he even backed down even prior to the election from his statement that he could even constitutionally, he realized it would be unconstitutional to put forward a mask mandate. So he backed down on that. He just stopped talking about it. And it was well known that was the case. So he also knows that he cannot, mandate a national lockdown. But what they can do is start recommending at the level of, say, the CDC they can recommend from the CDC that states should go through lockdown procedures or something to that effect. So it's kind of like this weird indirect call for action.
You're right, Norman, because in the beginning stages of this and these rumors, it was questioned if we are going to go into lockdown. The Biden administration did say, well, if the CDC recommends it, that's what we're going to do. But I don't think that the people are going to just do that. And I think we might start trading hard currency like gold and privatizing our own law enforcement. So thank you, Southern Venezuela.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, the more I love the phrase that we get from Leia in Star Wars, you know, the more that you tighten your grip, the more star systems will just slip through your fingers, and that's what's ultimately going to happen. You know, the more
beautifully said, Norman.
Yeah, it's well, you know, it's 1977 George Lucas, so you know.
Yeah.
Well, he was cool at one point. Okay.
Yeah, true.
Well, yeah. Well, the last thing that we want to talk about is a little bit of old news, but it's something that I think is really important to hear. And so we're going to be talking about the news of the Canadian Indian schools and what happened with that. So Norman's going to tell us more about that.
Yeah, this is a story that I was totally unaware of until it actually came to my attention via Christianity Today. And so I'm going to share some material here. We'll make sure all the links are down below as well. You may not be able to see the CT article in the end, but these others that you will. So I was very much unaware of the phenomenon of the residential school. These are schools that were founded in particular in Canada as a means of educating the First Nations, or the Native Americans of the who lived in the Canadian lands, and it was sort of astounding. You wonder, like, well, how could this possibly happen? So first of all, what did happen? So these schools are put up, they're operating for quite a while, and the recent news is that remains of 215 children were found buried at the former British Columbian residential school. This is absolutely confirmed. This is not fake news in any way. This is absolutely the case. And I'm like, what in the world is this? How what is a residential school? How did this happen? What is this at all? Well, you start learning, and as you kind of go through this, that the residential school system itself is one of the most oppressive things that I have ever seen come out of a government with respect to education. Imagine compulsory education on steroids that makes Orwell look like, looks like the Trump administration's education secretary. And I mean, it's absolutely insane. These people, the governments, under the guise of working with essentially trying to civilize people, believing that their civilization was superior enough that they had the right to rip children away from their parents, forcibly put them in these schools, and then, of course, this would inevitably lead to mistreatment, because they've already given tacit approval to the dehumanization of these people by telling them that they don't have the right to be with their family, that these people's culture is superior to their own, and so on. And I don't mean to sound like kind of a just a reactionary here. This is the type of things people say in these sorts of scenarios, and they would ultimately end up abusing them, and so that to the point of death at times. You have all sorts of crazy stories that come out of this, and it's just really sad to kind of see the history of this, but it's all kind of coming to light more and more and more. And even the Canadian government has issued their own sort of form of apologies to it. What's interesting is that, another kind of function of this, these were in part run with Christian support. The Catholic Church was involved, and other churches too. And what I think is somewhat interesting about it is that, one, you're seeing a lot of kind of hand-wringing around Christian involvement itself. And there is, something to be said for that, for sure. I get it. But what seems to be kind of less appropriately addressed, either by these news articles or even by Christianity Today, is how complicit the government is in this. Christians cannot natively really come to the conclusion that it's appropriate to rip people away from their families in order to put them in a school. It's long been part of Christian history to start schools, to educate people, because they do, literacy is a good thing, and teaching people about, we're people of the book. So we respect the idea that it's a good thing to develop, to develop written language for even people like Native Americans, and that happened many times. There's lots of really interesting stories about missionaries who go and help Native Americans to turn their language into something that's also written so that they can receive a Bible. This is part of, and that's the sort of thing that is wonderful about spreading Christian values in this way. But when you cannot either, from the Bible or from Christian history, like realistically come to the conclusion that you have the right to tear apart families in order to put them in a school. The only way you can do that is if you justify it with the power of the state. And that's what I think is being missed in some of these articles here, even whether by CT or otherwise, is that this is essentially a form of compulsory education. So what we do now in Canada, what we do in Canada, I'm not in Canada, but what happens in Canada, what happens in the United States with respect to compulsory schooling is not some, it's just a slightly more peaceful version of what went on with the First Peoples, the First Nations. And I don't mean to denigrate or diminish their suffering, because it's absolutely horrible. It never should have happened. Absolutely awful. But the part of the lesson of this is that the state is responsible ultimately for this type of activity and using religion as a cover. Okay, this is not about that. That religion is inherently oppressive or something like that. No. It's not about that at all. It's about who gets to order who else around. And sometimes people like to use religion for cover for that. So that is not part of who we are as Christians. We should always avoid such things. Whereas education is. And we do, and in fact, what is LCI's mission? Our mission is to educate. And we hope that, through things like this and demonstrating these sorts of principles in these sorts of ways will help you to understand just how bad the state is at infiltrating all of what is good and turning it upside down. So
this happened from 1890 to 1969. Did I hear that?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's absolutely heinous.
And so over the years, children would just, did they determine how these children died?
Some of them died from malnourishment. Some of them died from mistreatment. Some of them died from, just getting sick. Just total. It's all over the map, man. Yeah. And even for the, what's kind of crazy to even consider here is you read some of this stuff, and some of them are, here's a good, in the weeks of the discovery since Kamloops, this author from CT's listened to the stories, and many of the Native American peoples in Canada were not just, they understood, like they knew that this was the thing, and they say it's about time it got revealed. Here's another crazy thing.
Shocked by the discovery. Wow.
Yeah, they're not even shocked. They're not, because they know that they're survivors of this. You can read some of the stories and they're horrific. One interesting silver lining, God makes a way where there is no way. And you still find so many people who became believers through the actions of good missionaries and good churches of that time, who saw all of this, and they still saw the goodness of Jesus and the wonderful grace and mercy of our God, and said, these people are not our people. Yeah. And so they saw that, and they recognized that too. And so there's no real silver lining to it by any means. It's all horrific. But God did break through and still redeemed people through it. And that's an incredible thing. So I would highly recommend, we'll make sure these links are in the show notes best we can. I think that it just behooves you as a human being to know that this happened, and to see that these sorts of things are the results of crazy policy that forces people against their will away from their families. And disrupting their lives like this. It's completely and utterly unjustified, and we will never try to apologize or make an apology for to defend those types of systems. That's just that's, to be clear.
This is this is one of the biggest resources and reasons for our friend Corey DeAngelis's work for school choice. You know, in things like this, school choice and freedom, these kinds of things don't happen. But this is just awful.
It's
just
really awful. So I think it's important to kind of know about this. I was moved by the whole thing. I think it's good to kind of remember and to you know, just to don't let this stuff happen again.
Norm, I want to sort of dovetail your story a little bit, because the United States have had these residential boarding schools as well, and you drew out the point that these things wouldn't have been able to exist and thrive without the state. And you know, this is something that's close to my heart because in New Mexico we have many Native people here. And there are two Indian schools, residential Indian schools that were started here in New Mexico, one by the U.S. government, one by the Presbyterian Church. And when I dug into the history of that, the short story is that the schools that were founded and established by the U.S. federal government were founded on a program that were designed by a U.S. Army general. I forget his name, but he's from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and there's a school. There's a school there, but he's the one that had this philosophy of kill the Indian, save the man, and so that was the premise of these Indian schools in America. And
no, not from Pennsylvania.
Right. No, it wasn't good. What I found out though about the one that was started by the Presbyterian Church were the only denominations of Christians that were willing to come into New Mexico and stay here. And the Native Americans were actually looking for education, and the Presbyterian Church was trying to get them education from the Home Missions Board. And it was just very difficult to get resources way out here in the middle of the desert. When they established the school, they were able to do it because, guess who? The federal government donated a building to them. And after 5 years, they shut down the school. The Presbyterians shut down the school. Now, I don't know why. And actually, the church that started it still exists. And I want to go on a fact-finding mission. But I suspect that the reason why it got shut down was because the federal government either wanted to implement this program or had started to, and the Presbyterians said no. When they did reopen the school, but it was just a regular boys' school for Spanish kids. So at any rate, I wanted to draw out that history because a lot of people are blaming Christians for this. And I think it's important to emphasize that not all Christians are responsible for this. But at the same time, our government most definitely is responsible. And it's time that we call them to the carpet on this sort of stuff.
Darn right.
So, yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Way to end on a high note, guys.
Yes, super high note.
Man.
The good news is,
thanks.
The good news is that we didn't spontaneously combust into hellfire because you have a woman leading the way here. So
I mean, we'll find out what our final judgment will be at some point.
There's still time.
There's still time. We have a couple seconds left here.
Matthew's going, Jesus, this is under duress. I'm doing this under duress.
The Red Sea might fall on me at any moment. Who knows?
All right, very good. Well, any links that we talked about will be in the show notes, and please share this episode with your friends, and give us a like, and subscribe. And we will see you guys in the next roundtable.
A couple weeks. Thanks, guys.